Welcome back, everybody. This is your host, Christopher Renne, once again from The Chris Renne Show and Pints at the Round Table. Just asking you to follow me on Twitter at Chris RenneMB, as well as on Instagram at Chris RenneMB. Don't forget to follow the Mom's Basement Productions page on Twitter and Instagram at MBasementProd for all things Mom's Basement Productions, and like us on Facebook at Mom's Basement Prod. Also, if you'd like to, please go rate our two podcasts in Pints at the Round Table and The Chris Renne Show. Rate and subscribe so you never miss a notification when a new show is posted. Thank you, and enjoy this show. How is everybody doing today? It is your host, Christopher Renne. It is a fine Wednesday afternoon for recording. Looks like it's about to rain. I started working out again, so I'm extremely sore. Not a fan of that. That's why I stopped in the first place. But, you got to start getting ready for intramural season at some point. So I decided to start yesterday after a fine Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully all you enjoyed your 3-day weekend. Hopefully some of you got a 4-day weekend. And most importantly, hopefully everyone paid their respects and remembered the troops. Absolutely an important part of that weekend and why we celebrate our freedom on that Monday with a day off. So before we get started, I'll give a rundown of what's going on with the show today. With the seasons coming to an end, there is quite a few NBA storylines before I get into an NBA Finals preview between the Warriors and Raptors. We all know it. We've been waiting, I think, like 10 days for it. So hopefully we get there soon. The conference finals were as good as advertised. Kawhi Leonard, phenomenal performance, as well as the Warriors in their sweep. Then I'm going to talk about just a quick couple NFL offseason storylines. Give you an update on my college football prep season and my plan for my college football shows as it gets closer. Then a little fun game at the end, so you're going to have to wait to find out what that is, but it's a Chris R. Ranks, and I will probably be making this into a YouTube video at the end, so just wait on that for the YouTube. It'll probably be posted around Thursday or Friday afternoon. But let's get it started. So I woke up today expecting it was probably just going to be another Lakers talk show because they keep just adding fuel to the fire every single time they do something. They throw sticks of dynamite in it. They throw some oil down there. Just keep the fire burning, And it's getting tiring. And this week I was like, you know what? Honestly, if there's new Lakers stuff, I'm not even going to talk about it. And then they put out this insane article. But first, I thought that story would lead us off today. But it's not going to. It's actually going to be the second story I talk about from these NBA headlines. And the first one, the Rockets. Daryl Morey, the Fertitta guy who owns it, they are aggressively exploring every trade option to improve upon the roster that's in place. They said every single player is available for the right price, excluding James Harden. Daryl Morey is an analytics guy. And sometimes analytics don't really always pay off. But some of these players were really good analytically, but once you get into that playoff situation when you're going up against a team like the Warriors, you're going to need guys who aren't scared of that moment. Some of these players that can be traded include Clint Capella, one of the guys who's been one of the foundation pieces of those Rocket teams. He's a really good passing big man, and he just cleans the glass. Then you've got Eric Gordon, a shooting guard, who's phenomenal in the regular season and had some really big moments in that series against the Warriors. And PJ Tucker, he's a very well-rounded, pretty much the epitome of an NBA power forward. He's a little undersized, but can guard 2 to 5. He's a guy who can switch on screens, switch in the pick and roll situation. He can knock down an outside jumper. He's an aggressive rebounder. He's just a guy who hustles every second of a game. And you don't really get those guys anywhere, and you don't grow on trees. But when you look at the rest of the Rockets roster, which I'm looking up right now, just for clarification, to see who they're going to have. Gerald Green, Kenneth Faried, Iman Shumpert, Austin Rivers. It's not really a roster I see being one that could win a championship. And as good as Austin Rivers played in the postseason, and as good as Iman Shumpert showed up for first time in years, that was the first time I saw his name. It was insane. So, you look at it, what can they do to make this roster better? I think you got to get a little younger, most importantly, and you have to get better ball handlers around James Harden, and you have to get rid of Chris Paul's $120 million contract to deepen the bench, because when you're playing in the postseason with 7 players and the rosters are rotating 9 and the Trailblazers are rotating 9 and the Denver Nuggets are an extremely deep team, it's going to run into some trouble. And I know 10 or 11 guys can play in the regular season, but you're still using your guys, and the work rate of an 82-game basketball season is too much when you don't have depth in the playoffs. The intensity ramps up. So, I didn't really look into trade pieces yet. That might be something I do as we go. But the fact that Daryl Morey is willing to trade some of his best players is kind of crazy. They failed, 3 years in a row? They keep trying to beat the Warriors with the same formula, the same team, and they came close. We were all rooting for them. Every single person, except Warriors fans. And they couldn't do it. CP3 hamstring gave out, and is CP3 a phenomenal player? Absolutely, but he's 34 years old, and it's time for him to start looking for other places to work. I think a team that would honestly, and this isn't me just talking out, but I think you can see a team like the Lakers actually trying to make a move for Chris Paul. I don't really see them wanting Lonzo Ball, but they could definitely use, say, a Kyle Kuzma or another guy who can create his own shot like Brandon Ingram. You look at other teams kind of good with young talent who need a veteran point guard. They're not in great markets, so I don't think that would be appealing to Chris Paul at all. I think the Mavericks are an option. I think you look at what they need. His veteran leadership can really be something that takes a Kristaps team and a Luka Doncic-led team to that next level they need to get to if they're going to be thought of as serious contenders. Going around the league, there's just not that many places I see that $120 million contract fitting for 3 years, which is a big reason that's a problem. A lot of NBA teams would love to have Chris Paul, but I don't think a lot of teams want to have Chris Paul's contract. You just look around. Where does he belong now? There's so many good point guards in the league at this point in time. So many young point guards. It's very much like the quarterback issue in the NFL. Right now, it's not really an issue. There's so many good quarterbacks, but then there's so many quarterbacks that are young and unproven. The Hawks have Trae Young, so that's obviously not an option. He's not going to want to go to a non-contender. And a lot of the places that are contenders don't need a point guard. That's why they're contenders. We got to see what happens with Kyrie Irving and the Celtics, because then it might be a quick way to just ease that pain, because as good as Terry Rozier is, I don't think he's a starting point guard in the league. The Spurs are always an option. I think he'd fit really good in the Spurs organization. So if I had to make a list right now on the top of my head it would probably be the Spurs, the Knicks, the Lakers, and if Kyrie Irving leaves, the Celtics as my options for him. Every other team sort of doesn't really need him or isn't a place he'd want to go. I forgot to put the Mavericks on that list, but I think you guys can tell by the way I was talking about that team that would probably honestly not be the worst place for him to go. The other players, I think since they're younger, the Clint Capellas, the PJ Tuckers, you could find, and their contracts are more team friendly, you can find a lot more options for those types of guys. I think PJ Tucker can fit in on any team. He's a versatile player. He can play a lot of positions. He can shoot the ball from outside, which is, like I said, what you want from a big man in today's game. Clint Capella, he's just a guy who eats the glass. So, I mean, you like that energy. He doesn't really bring much, but he's a good screener of the basketball. You know, he's a really good defender for a 7-footer. He can switch on everything. So he's a really good trade piece. And, I mean, every single player being tradable is interesting, but I think it's reasonable because what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I think the problem is you can't play the waiting game in the NBA, but this team can beat the Warriors if Kevin Durant isn't there. Because they were playing the Warriors pretty even, and then you add the Kevin Durant statistics to it, and it just is not friendly to them, or anyone for that matter. So, as much as you'd want to blow this thing up and move on, I think waiting for Kevin Durant to make his decision would be in the best interest of the team, even if that hurts some of the trade values you have. All in all, I think it's time for that strategy to move forward. I think it's time to probably, honestly, even move forward from Mike D'Antoni. I think he's got one more shot to do it. They wanted Ty Lue as a lead assistant. That's not going to happen. But I can see Ty Lue taking over for the Rockets and James Harden after they fire Mike D'Antoni next year or midseason, depending on how it goes. So, moving forward to some more big news. And as we know in the world, there are just some stories and things that just keep on giving. And that is the Los Angeles Lakers. We thought the drama was done with the Magic Johnson interview. We thought everyone had moved on. We thought Jeannie Buss had finally made some professional decisions and finally did it. Put Rob Pelinka in charge. Squash the rumors that she's not in control of the organization. You know, it's an interesting story. This would have never happened when the doctor was alive, Dr. Buss. I think since 2013, the Lakers have been far and out a disaster. Part of that was the farewell tour of Kobe and that arm barring them from a contract standpoint. But let's go to the article. Lakers, ESPN.com. So the article was titled Lakers 2.0, the failed reboot of the NBA's crown jewel, and is written by Baxter Holmes, an ESPN senior writer. And that's the thing is, when you read a story from a journalist, oftentimes there's going to be truth behind it whether you like it or not. They're getting these reports from people inside the organization. And if it's an anonymous report, you got to still trust it, because if it comes to them making up sources, they're never going to work again. While also, if they tell who the sources are, they're never going to have any more sources. So, this article sort of just highlighted some of the major lows of the Lakers organization over the past year or so. And it starts with once Magic Johnson was appointed. The article starts with, "It was shocking. said one Lakers coaching staff member who was present after Johnson drove home his point. He had a large stack of resumes sitting on his desk. He said 1,000 of them. And he could replace any of them at any time. This led to an already hostile work environment, apparently. The coach also added, a member of the staff said, if you questioned him on anything, his response was always a threatening tone. He said he only used intimidation and bullying. They always talked about that new beginning, which was so fruitful. And then the one thing that wasn't predictable when this all started was the LeBron effect and him coming. So I wrote down my takeaways from the article. If you want to go check it out yourself, just go type in the Lakers 2.0, the rebooting of the crown jewel, or Lakers ESPN like I just did, and you'll see a lot of these issues that are moving on and moving forward. So there's a lot of interesting things. One quote I saw was interesting was when they were talking about the trade market, and a member from the staff below the general manager was like, we all had the same reaction that the basketball world did. Like, what the F are we doing? Not only are we not getting shooting, but we're also getting every basket case left on the market. So a lot of the people on the Lakers staff felt like general managers, Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson, were sabotaging the Lakers, one or the other. They weren't sure. This was a crazy thing to read, being that the Lakers have historically been one of the most well-run organizations. That's why they are who they are. I saw this thing, I didn't even know about it, but a player represented by Rich Paul, the same agent as LeBron and the lead agent at Clutch Sports, the company LeBron owns and finances. He represents Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, one of the big first moves the Lakers made. KCP missed 4 games because he was in jail. There's 9 games during his jail sentence. So he had a DUI, and he messed up his, what's it called? When someone gets off jail. Doesn't matter. He messed up his parole agreement. That's the word I was looking for. And he got sentenced to 25 days in prison. So over those 25 days, he missed 4 games and did not travel with the team because he wasn't allowed out of the state of California. He was in Seal Beach Police Department's correctional facility, and he was on a work release program so he can continue practicing with the team. That was an insane thing, and I can't believe I didn't know about that. I feel like a lot of people didn't know about that before this article came out, and I think it really does highlight some of the other problems that were in this organization. Another thing was how Michael Beasley and another veteran that was traded at the deadline treated Luke Walton. They thought they were better than him. He got mad at them for playing selfish basketball, which was probably really true. Michael Beasley has never been known to be a team first player. So, as you know, they got traded at the deadline. The next quote that really stood out to me, quit making this about thinking these guys are babies, because that's what you're treating them like. Johnson said to Luke Walton, they're professionals, all of them, and this is how the league works. They know it, I know it, that's how it goes. And a big conversation topic around the trade deadline was how it was affecting the younger guys like Kyle Kuzma, like Lonzo Ball, when they were all being thrown out in the news for Anthony Davis. That is one thing I will defend the Lakers on. I understand it's a business. I don't care how it's ran. Your name in the NBA is worth as much as the team thinks it is, and they can trade you whenever. That's a business. That's why I support NBA players in free agency going to other places, because you look at what happened with DeMar DeRozan. You look at what happens to some of these all-time greats when they have reached their ceiling and the NBA general managers and owners see an opportunity, they trade them. So that's why I understand the freedom and stuff the players like to practice. The last quote that stood out to me, I feel like everyone that's no longer here, as sad as that is, that they're no longer there, it's a blessing, a former staffer said. It's not a good place to be. It's not what Dr. Buss wanted it to be. So Dr. Buss always ran the Lakers organization the same way throughout his time there. It was a fun environment to work in. It was very professional. It was run like a Hollywood production company. And as it went, Jeannie fired her brother and longtime general manager Mitch Kupchak, which was absurd. Her brother was the president of basketball operations. Mitch Kupchak was the GM. They moved on. They eventually hired Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka. Didn't work out. The Lakers have been an utter disaster since Jim Buss died. So it's tough. I think the Lakers did need to clean house regardless. I think they need to start from scratch, get a new team in there, and continue working. But, I mean, I think there's the major takeaway from this is the Lakers are an absolute disaster. Everyone's like, you see LeBron drinking wine, having fun. That's because that's all I can do. LeBron is going to have to single-handedly save this organization. He's going to have to convince some stars to leave some better situations, come to him so they can win. And I think it's possible. I think LeBron's done other things. And I do believe that the Lakers will come out better from this. I think having all this dirty laundry aired is going to really make them self-reflect as a whole organization. And I think it's really going to be like poking a hibernating bear. You don't want a organization like the Lakers to be as motivated as they should be. If they continue to be this disastrous, I don't know what's going to happen. Adam Silver was on an interview today on Get Up with ESPN, and he said he believes in Jeannie Buss. I'm not sure I do, but we're going to have to. Jeannie Buss or one of the shadow presidents or one of the 9 people in charge of the Lakers has to get this right, and I think that's what needs to get done. I think everyone does. I think it's good for the NBA when major franchises are good. And I think the Lakers and LeBron need to be in the playoffs for the storylines itself and the ratings, to be honest. The NBA is a star-driven league. I've talked about that before. And the biggest star in the league is still LeBron, regardless of Kawhi doing what he did and Giannis doing what he did before he ran into Kawhi, and regardless of what the Warriors are doing. It's just not the same without LeBron, and I'm going to make a prediction right now that the ratings are going to be way down compared to what they have been. Number one, they're playing a team from Toronto, so the television deals with that are a little different. And two, it's just not going to interest as many people. So yeah, that's it for the Lakers talk. This week I kept it a little shorter than last week. I went real in depth to the Lakers' problems last week. I gave you some free agents that they're going to have to sign. I will say this, for more Lakers stuff, go listen to my last show, episode 45. It was a big Lakers show. And we'll keep this updated as the summer goes, because I have a feeling it's just getting started. Continuing forward with the NBA, a major recruit, RJ Hampton, the number, I want to say 5 recruit in the country, and I want to say the number 1 or 2 point guard in the country, according to most recruiting sites. He's from Texas. He's a combo guard. Yeah, so he's the number 2 combo guard in the country, number 1 player in Texas, and number 5 nationally. He was projected the number 6 overall pick in the 2020 NBA draft. So it's a pretty big deal. This is one of the biggest stars who's ever done this without questions of eligibility. So he signed with the New Zealand Breakers of the NBL. The NBL is a league that has grown in prestige over the years, and a lot of players are seeing this as an option rather than the G League because it's a professional basketball league. It's an extremely high level. It's a place where, if you're a younger guy, I know there's 3 or 4 players in the NBA who have played in it. Dellavedova's played in it. Andrew Bogut won the MVP of the league, which is a little crazy to me. Just shows how good NBA players truly are. Dante Exum, before he came to America, played in that league. He was one of the higher-rated players in the NBA. There's probably a list of more players out there. You know, I know a lot of these players are working to get to the NBA. It's a lot like the G League. Some players are going to be stuck there forever because of their age. All in all, though, it's an interesting take. I know a lot of players are starting to look at professional leagues as more of an option. You saw LeVar Ball last year. As a big talk was his big baller league. You see the G League growing in prestige year in and year out. Once they renegotiate the collective bargaining agreement to that, I think the G League players will start to get paid more. So what does this mean? The number 6 player in the nation for the 2020 class is going to play basketball professionally rather than college. So the big example I have of a player doing this, well, there's 2, and they were both guards as well. Brandon Jennings was one who went to play in China. He had questions about his eligibility for taking impermissible benefits from someone to help his mom, so he ended up playing across seas in Europe. And then you have Emmanuel Mudiay, who went and played in the Chinese basketball league, the CBL, and ended up still getting drafted in the top 10. He still hasn't worked out in the NBA, and Brandon Jennings was a little ball-centric, would be a nice way to put it. Both players had immense talent coming out from high school. Both players had those eligibility issues, so they decided to take their talents overseas. RJ Hampton does not have those. So it's interesting to see him taking his talents to New Zealand. The New Zealand Breakers. I don't know much about the New Zealand Breakers. I don't know much about individual teams in Europe. Australia. So he snubs Blue Bloods, Kansas, Duke, among others. He had offers from every school in the country. He's the number 6 player. The NBA. A lot of people have been talking about this being the new norm. I saw Jay Williams saying that I think a lot more players are going to do this until they start paying college athletes. I don't want to see that as the argument because I don't think paying college athletes is the answer to this competition. I think a lot of athletes realize, and athletes are smart, that if I go to Australia, if I go to Europe, that's pretty much a year of losing free marketing for myself. Yes, I make money and bottom line stuff, but if Zion Williamson went and played in Europe, if Zion Williamson went and played in Australia, if he went and played in China, he would have dominated the Chinese league. But when was the last time you heard about a player dominating in a league other than the NBA or college basketball? He didn't. So when you think of a blue blood Kansas, Duke, UCLA, even though they're not as good anymore, these schools, you look at players who've put out. Lonzo, what helped his marketing more? Playing in a professional league ran by his dad or playing at one of the most prestigious basketball institutes in the United States? You look at RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson. last year. Every single game they played was on ESPN. Every single game was on ESPN or ESPN2. They were on TV all the time, and no, they didn't get paid. But they got covered, and that put their name out there. And now everyone and their mother knows who Zion Williamson is. Oh, you look at Andrew Wiggins. He was from Canada. He could have easily stayed and played in the Canadian League. But he decided to come to Kansas. Maple Jordan to the United States. Ended up marketing himself and making him one of the most touted draft prospects in the NBA draft history. There's so many options now for players to go play, and I hope this works out for them because it's not going to work out for everybody. Just like college doesn't work out for everybody. Sorry, I was typing in. So, yeah, looking at the 10 blue bloods of basketball, you got Ohio State, UConn, Michigan State, Louisville, Indiana, Kansas, Duke, North Carolina, UCLA, and Kentucky. So, what's the difference between going and playing internationally than playing at those schools? It's marketing. It's marketing, it's marketing, it's marketing. And what's the biggest thing a new business needs? A new business needs to be seen. And when you look at a player who's playing in Australia, you're not going to see him for an entire year. When you look at a player who's playing in Europe, you're not going to see him for an entire year. But when you go to Duke, when you go to Kansas, when you go to Kentucky, when you go to UCLA, when you go to a big-time school, you're going to get the attention you deserve as a top recruit. And that's what's going to lead to you making the most money from advertising. If Zion went to Europe, he would not have got the Nike deal or deal he's going to get from a shoe company. Ja Morant played in the NCAA, got a Nike shoe deal. Different sort of standard. He wasn't really recruited. RJ Hampton was, but I don't think it's going to be a new norm. I think most people are smart enough to know that 6 months at Duke is a lot more worth it in the end than 6 months to 8 months in Australia. So that was an interesting story to me. I think a lot of people are overreacting to it. I know for a fact that it's not going to change much. I don't think paying basketball players is the answer. I don't think paying football players is the answer to this problem. I think college brands are worth more than the NBL all as a whole. So, don't look for this to be a new norm in the future. And actually, more times than not, it's backfired and stunted the development of a lot of players. So, before we move on to my NBA Finals preview, I'm going to take a break to grab some water. But stick around. I'm going to give you some key players for both sides, the keys for both teams. And I'm going to tell you how each team can win the NBA Finals. Right before I come back, then we got some NFL offseason storylines I'm going to hit on quick and my college football prep before our fun game. So thanks for tuning in so far. I will be back in, well, for you, no time at all. But for me, 5. All right, I'm back. I watched a couple videos on Twitter. Some things might have just got it added to the show. The more you know, am I right? All right, so before we get to the NFL headlines I'd like to talk about, I am going to give you a reasonably timed NBA Finals preview. I've done a little research. I've watched the entirety of most of the playoffs. I think I've formed a reasonable opinion about this, and I've had 10 days to think about it. So here's my NBA Finals preview. I'm going to start with the Warriors, then I'm going to move to the Raptors, and then I'm going to give my prediction. So for the Warriors in the NBA Finals, this is them going for a three-peat and 5 straight Finals appearances. If Steph wins, it's going to be his 4th ring. Draymond's 4th ring, Klay's 4th ring. It's been a phenomenal run for him. stamped by only one blemish, and that is that 3-1 lead they blew in June 2016. It was a phenomenal run. It was beautiful to watch, but we can't live in the past. We got to live in the now. So, to get this thing rolling, the Warriors got here by sweeping the Trailblazers, beating their foe. Let's look at it in depth. They beat the Clippers 4-2. That series was a little bit of a mess, but the Clippers truly challenged them and fought to the end. Then they beat the Rockets 4-2. And then they come and they sweep the Trailblazers. So they're coming into this 12-4 in the playoffs. Pretty good run so far. A lot less wear and tear on them than the team they're opposing. So we'll start with some key players. You look at the Warriors' roster. In this sweep, they had to have some players that weren't playing a lot make up for some production of a pretty well-renowned star in Kevin Durant. The first one I'm going to talk about is Jordan Bell. Jordan Bell's an inconsistent player. He's not very versatile offensively. He's a good screener of the ball. He's a good rebounder. And he's really good athletic, and he moves around well with the offense, which is perfect for Steph, Clay to get their shots. Jordan Bell's going to have to continue that. Going up against Marc Gasol, Pascal Siakam, Serge Ibaka. He's going to have to keep those bigger guys out of the paint. It's a big task for him. But when you're screening like he does, it's going to be a pretty big deal. The next key player on the list, Kevon Looney. Kevon Looney was a revelation for them in that Trailblazers series. He played huge minutes, absolutely rebounded like a monster. 14 rebounds, 12 points in their closeout game that they won in overtime. He played a phenomenal part in replacing Kevin Durant's production, getting second chance shot opportunities. He dominated Enes Kanter, he dominated Maurice Harkless, and that's what he's going to have to do against Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka. It's going to be a lot harder. They're a lot bigger, they're a lot stronger, and they're a lot more experienced. But it's going to be a big X factor in this game when it comes down to the keys to victories. The next key player on the list, Andre Iguodala, the former Finals MVP, one of the most versatile defenders in the game. As he gets older, he continues to lose a step. But he's one of the best situational players in NBA history. He has done nothing but provide clutch shots, clutch moments, and extremely tough on-ball defense. He's a terrible three-point shooter, but in the right moment, he usually comes up big and hits one. He's a guy who's helped with runs. He passes the ball really well. He's just a good all-around basketball player, and he really fits into the Warriors' MO. All in all, I really like Andre Iguodala. I think he's going to be the primary defender on Kawhi Leonard. That's going to be his primary job. And if he's been tasked with stopping the best player prior, I think it's going to be significant if he could slow down Kawhi even a little bit. That's going to be a very damaging effect to the Raptors' chances. And lastly, it's Draymond Green. He's the last key player, not named Steph or Klay Thompson for obvious reasons. Draymond Green played his best basketball of this season in that 4-game stretch against the Portland Trail Blazers. triple-doubles, tons of rebounds, decent amounts of points. Most importantly, a ton of assists, no technicals, no drama, all business. And that's the Draymond Green people actually like to root for. Draymond Green was an underdog, and then once he got to the top, he became one of the worst athletes to see on television because it was just always annoying. Now, he's playing ball. He's going to work his way into a Supermax contract, and I think him on Kawhi Leonard, him on Marc Gasol, him on Serge Ibaka, him switching on ball screens, it's going to be tough for him. I think it's going to be a very, very important series for Draymond Green from a legacy standpoint. And if he can do this and play the way he's capable of playing, he can really set the tone for the series and get this thing wrapped up quick. I think of all the players on the floor during this series, the two most important are Andre Iguodala and Draymond Green, both for their defensive prowess and both for their versatility. This moves me forward to the keys for the Warriors when it comes to winning the NBA Finals. The first key, Steph needs to continue his run. Steph is playing basketball out of his mind. Absolutely, he averaged 36 points in the 4 games in the conference finals, and it was like 34.5 since Kevin Durant got hurt. The next key for the Warriors to win this is Draymond needs to remain a world-class defender and be prepared for his biggest challenge yet. Marc Gasol is no easy task. Serge Ibaka is a veteran. He's able to move to his spots. He's able to get into position. He's going to be a menace. That's what he does. He's going to have to be able to guard Pascal Siakam. He's going to have to be able to guard Kawhi Leonard. He's capable of it, but it's going to be a big ask for him, especially if Boogie or Kevin Durant doesn't come back healthy. The last key for the Warriors is the bench and other starters need to continue doing their jobs. The group that is not Klay Thompson, the group that is not Steph Curry, the group that is not Draymond Green need to continue to play at the level they're playing at. You don't need all of them to be great in the same night, and if they are, the Warriors are obviously going to win that game. But when you get a game from Quinn Cook like you did, when you get a game from Kevon Looney like you did in Game 4, when you get a game from all these guys, Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston, that is what makes the Warriors special. This team knows their roles well, and they need to continue to do that. From Kevon Looney to Quinn Cook to Sean Livingston to Jonas Jerebko, it's an important series, and it's the most important series. It's the NBA Finals, and I think a lot of these guys, this is the most different team they've had since they won the first one. And these guys can really prove to themselves that they truly didn't need Kevin Durant, that they truly didn't need DeMarcus Cousins this year. And in those 2 finals when they won without Kevin Durant, or they could have won them, that's something that they can prove to themselves. So the Warriors win if they stick to the formula that's worked for them over time. You see what the Warriors have done over the last 5 years, and 4 out of the 5 times it's worked. So it's going to be no easy task for Kawhi Leonard, for the Raptors to take this team down, regardless of if Kevin Durant or Boogie plays. I think the formula is ball movement, versatility, confidence, and never backing down. The Warriors play basketball like no one's seen before, and if this is the last run for them, this might be it. And I mean, there's been talk about it, that this is their last ride. That came out at the beginning of the playoffs. They seem more focused than ever. Klay might leave, Draymond might leave, Kevin Durant might leave. It might be a whole different team walking through those doors next year. It's a wait and see, but they just need to stick to the formula that's gotten them all the accolades they have. And if they do that, more likely than not, they will be NBA champions. One last thing I'm going to hit on before I move on to the Raptors section is the KD and Boogie. This series is not dependent on these two. The Warriors are a great team without him, as we saw what they did to the Trailblazers. But these two would take it from a 6 or 7 game series to a sweep or a gentleman's sweep, a 4 or 5 game series. I think you got to look for Boogie to for sure play. This means a lot to Boogie. I think Kevin Durant's calf strain's worse than people let on. I don't know if he's going to play a game in this series, but if he does, it'll be more of a symbolic role. And, I mean, Kevin Durant can come in and strap 5 or 6 threes without having to take a dribble. So, I'd be ready for that. But in the NBA Finals, regardless of who you think is going to win, there are going to be 2 teams that take the floor. These questions I ask. So the key players for the Toronto Raptors as we move forward to close out my NBA Finals preview. The key players, Pascal Siakam. He's up for the Most Improved Player award. He's been great throughout the season. He's one of the most improved players I've seen in the NBA history, from his first year to his second year to his third year. The jumps and strides he's taken have been phenomenal, and I really think he's going to continue to grow and be rewarded as an all-star. But that takes place next year. I don't think Siakam played his best in the conference finals, and I think he's going to have to remember how to shoot a three-point shot if they're going to have any chance. The one strength he brings, whether he's shooting well or not, is his defensive versatility, which is a word you've heard me say a lot, and it's a word you're going to hear me keep saying. Pascal Siakam is an extremely talented player, and he's going to have to play at the level he's capable of. The next players on the list, I put the 2 point guards, Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet. Kyle Lowry has had a rough go of it as an NBA star. He was a guy who came into the league not very touted, not very seen, and then he played for the Rockets. He moved around the league quite a bit, and then finally found a home in Toronto and became an all-star caliber point guard. Kyle Lowry's story is one that a lot of people would root for, but with his performances against LeBron James and the Cavaliers, he's often forgotten and looked down upon in the annals of the league. Kyle Lowry has a moment to put all those haters to rest. I saw all the jokes about Kyle Lowry getting an NBA Finals appearance before all these great NBA players, and I thought it was hilarious. But at the end of the day, Kyle Lowry has earned it as much as every other NBA player. It's just people choose not to like Kyle Lowry because he doesn't dunk, because he doesn't yell, because he doesn't dress crazy. He's got a bad haircut. Regardless of why you don't like him, he's a great basketball player, and he's going to be an extremely vital piece to the Raptors winning in this series. But then you look at his backup point guard. Fred VanVleet has followed a very similar career arc. A lot of people, he came from a mid-major school. He wasn't well known unless you're a big college basketball fan. He played at Wichita State, the Shockers. He was huge in their tournament runs when they were at their peak. And he has turned into one of the most premier backup point guards in the league. And when I say premier backup point guards, that's like the Patty Mills to Tony Parker in San Antonio. That's the type of player he is. That's the J.J. Barea to Jason Kidd in the Dallas Mavericks. You know, a guy who could come in, you don't really miss a beat. They don't have the same gifts as an NBA starter, but they have so many skills and so much talent, and they're so smart about basketball that they're important. So Fred VanVleet just had a kid, and a crazy stat was he was shooting like 10% from 3 and like 28% from the floor, like the first 14 games of the playoffs, and really struggling. But the last 5 or 6 games, he's shooting like 68% from 3 and 52% from the field. And I don't think he's really missed a free throw. So Fred VanVleet's been playing out of his mind. If that continues, that's going to be a very impactful player in this series. And the next key players on the list I have are the bigs, Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka. The bigs are a challenge because, are they the greatest? No. And are they both old? Yes. Marc Gasol has been one of the most consistent centers over the last decade and a half. Very similar to his brother Pau in almost every single way, except he got traded from the Lakers for his brother because his brother was more mature at the time. But I'd say they're very similar players. Marc Gasol's carried a Memphis franchise for years, and I think he's finally got his one shining moment opportunity to win this NBA Finals. Will he do it? I don't know, but it's really good to see one of the good guys in the league getting this opportunity. Then you look at Serge Ibaka. He's been here before. He played on that Oklahoma City team with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. What does he still bring to the table? He's a decent mid-range jump shooter. He's a good screener. He's good in the pick and roll. Defensively, he's slowly become a liability when it comes to ball movement, so that's going to be a challenge for him against these Warriors. It was a challenge in that 3-1 series when they lost to the Warriors. I know he was brought in to help stop LeBron. That never worked. It's been a rough go for Serge Ibaka. He's been on a lot of teams that have won a lot, but he has never won. He's a terrible fighter. Strong dude. I think he's going to be very impactful. And then the last key player is Norman Powell. Once again, versatile defender. Could defend 1 through 4. A very good player. Like Fred VanVleet was struggling, still struggled. Albeit he did hit some big shots in that last game to sort of separate the Raptors from the Bucks. He came up big and at times of need, and that's what they're going to need from him. They're going to need him to be a lot better offensively. They're going to need him to stay aggressive. They're going to need him to be confident. And with those 4 key players, so I guess 6 players, I think they're going to be extremely vital to the success. I did not use Kawhi Leonard because, for obvious reasons, he's the most vital player to the Raptors. I don't think I need to speak on that anymore. So the keys for the Raptors need to dominate the interior and force the Warriors from small ball. So they need Kevon Looney in the game. They need to have Andrew Bogut play more minutes than they did against the Trailblazers. They're old, and if you tire them out, they're going to be a worse team because of it. The Raptors can play small ball. They're capable of it, but you don't want to. When you have a player like Marc Gasol, you don't want him off the court because he's such a valuable asset. I think all in all, if they can dominate the interior and force the Warriors away from their small ball lineup, it gives them the best. I had my audio cut out, but they need to get them away from their small ball lineup. And if they do that, it takes them out of their strength. It takes them out of their comfort zone. They need to slow the game down like LeBron did in the series they won. They need to ugly the game up with their defense. They need to be physical. They need to force Steph Curry to be uncomfortable. They need to force Klay Thompson to be uncomfortable. And all in all, they have a realistic shot to win. The next key is the defense on Klay. Now, Klay and Steph, if one of them goes off, you've got a shot. If both of them go off, more than likely or not, you're going to lose. Then not allowing a bench player to beat you. Quinn Cook scored 10 points, and those 10 points did the Trailblazers in. If you're going to get beat, you're going to make Steph Curry score 45, 50 points on you. You're not going to let Quinn Cook do it to you. You're not going to let Kevon Looney beat you. You can't do that. You can't let those role players win the game. And you need to be better outside shooting. You got to keep it close. If Golden State shoots 40%, you got to be at 38%. If you can match them like the Cavs did in 2016, even better. So I have the Raptors win if Kawhi continues the course and gets some much-needed consistent offensive help. It doesn't matter where it comes from, but the offensive help needs to be consistent. It needs to be there. Kawhi's had a run only one player in NBA history's done, and that one player did it 5 times. So Kawhi really did prove to everyone that he still is a top 5, and I'd honestly argue top 3 player in the league. I said that prior to the season. I thought Kawhi was still a top 3 player. A lot of people were like, he hasn't played, he's going to get hurt, all that stuff. But I really like him, and I will truly say I'll be rooting for the Toronto Raptors. My prediction, though, is Warriors in 6. The Warriors have too much culture on their side. But if an underdog is to do it, it will be led by a man who has been the underdog his whole life. The Warriors' big 3 is already big enough threat, and that is without the worry of Boogie or KD returning. So even if the teams play even, they might get DeMarcus Cousins back, checkmate. They might get Kevin Durant back, double checkmate, because it's really, honestly, just going to overwhelm them. So I do think the Warriors are going to win it. It sucks, but hopefully we get a good NBA Finals. And if an upset happens, I am not scared to eat crow on this prediction. I haven't been scared to eat crow on a Warriors prediction in a long time. I'm always going to predict them to win, even though I'm always going to root for them to lose. So as you can tell, I have high moral character. All right, so that's my NBA Finals prediction. Warriors in 6. Now to the NFL offseason. These are going to be quick hits. So Zeke got into an altercation with a security guard. I don't know what was said. The video was pretty bad. Zeke, why were you by yourself? Good question. The girl he was with seemed to be flustered. The security guard seemed to be edging the situation on. Zeke didn't really touch him. Zeke kind of got in his grill. And then the dude sort of flopped and flailed like a fish. I think the security guard's more in the wrong. I think everyone who pokes fun at celebrities is a terrible person. What people do for clout makes me sick. Don't try to instigate. It's a bad look. I think more people are on Zeke's side than you think. I saw that. I don't think Zeke was going to do anything. I get it. Zeke's a very big figure, and his threat of possible violence would be extremely scary. But for the security guard to ask for a sincere apology, you know what, dude? You should go be better. I know for a fact he was probably instigated, and I don't think there should be any trouble from this. I don't think it's a problem. I think Zeke needs to get better friends, and I think Zeke needs to stop going to festivals, because every time he goes to a festival, whether it's Mardi Gras or EDC, something ends up being newsworthy. So, come on, Zeke, be better. The next NFL offseason, Brady's beach workout. So, Tom Brady has been posting his workouts to Twitter, to Instagram, to Facebook. Tom Brady is on Twitter, if you didn't know. It was a pretty big deal. He started his Twitter on April Fool's and said, "I'm retiring." April Fool's, is this how Twitter works? LOL. Brady's working hard. Brady got a fresh fade. Brady's looking honestly more ripped than he has in years. He's looking extremely healthy. And he's having fun. You see him on Fallon. You see him on Kimmel. And I'd be worried. I just think the Patriots are going to do it again. And I keep seeing all these other teams saying, like, it's our time. But I just see so many problems with other teams' rosters. And usually great coaches can overcome them. But it's going to be hard. Because the Patriots can win so many ways. They beat the best offensive team by making it a defensive and ball control game. So you come up with something, and I will probably counter-argue. But then the last story, and I'm going to keep it professional. I'm going to keep it very journalistic. I'm going to keep my integrity here. There's an unnamed NFL AFC North quarterback who keeps getting flustered and attacking a radio host who I follow as well. The unnamed media member has, quote, said that Baker was undraftable and that he would never draft a quarterback who has a police video or a video of him grabbing his junk. Then Baker Mayfield came on his show, and there's been about a year-long feud now. Maybe a little bit longer than that. And Baker had a great year, and then Baker goes on. Oh, that's my fault. So the unnamed quarterback is Baker Mayfield, and the unnamed media member is Colin Cowherd. And this story has been hysterical for me to watch because I'm a fan of both. And Baker, this is the Baker moneymaker. You know, and I saw him talk about it today, or I listened to it, and he said, this is beneath Tom Brady, this is beneath John Elway, this is beneath Peyton Manning, this is beneath all the greats. And I remember watching the pre-draft lead-up, and I probably know more about it than you because I think I actually watched the entire shows, and I usually listen to him 3 or 4 days a week. He never said you were bad. He said he liked your accuracy. He said it was a really talented quarterback class. And he said that he wouldn't take you in the draft because of the immaturities that you've shown. And as a Browns fan, I'm going to support my quarterback. But at the same time, I have to tell you where he's right. And if you're going to go after people who tweet about you and who talk about you, one specific person, he's in your head, and there's bigger and better things to focus on. I get it, there's beef. You've met him in real life. He's talked about Odell Beckham Jr., but you have bigger things to worry about. And the one thing you can do to prove him wrong is not tweet him, but get silent and start working and start winning games. Because if you do talk to him and you do attack him on Twitter and then you do fail, he's going to be right. But if you work hard and screw your shoulders on the right way, you're going to either change his opinion or you're going to win games and it won't matter. So at the end of the day, winning is what will change everything, and winning is what you should want to do first and foremost over anything. I get it, bickering matches are fun, but there's no reason to be in a pissing contest with a radio host. So yeah. All right, I'm on to my college football prep. I'm reading Athlon Sports' College Football Preview magazine. Then I'm moving on to Street and Smith's, then Field Steals. So my plan for that is I am going to get back on my mom's basement sports blogger. I did some writing on it before, but I'm going to be writing some conference previews in depth. I've researched all these teams. I've been taking notes. It's been the most I've put into a project in a long time. And as the season gets closer, I'm going to have all these written, and I'll release a new one every day leading up to the season. You've got at least 5 of them. I'm not sure if I'm going to do 5 conference ones or do every conference because that's a total possibility. These magazines get really in depth to it. The group of 6 schools might get screwed over, and I might just do that day. Might just do them as a whole, but I think it'd be more fun to do every single conference. So that's my ambitious goal, but be ready for it to just be 6 posts. Another thing is I posted on Twitter my Athlon Sports catalog, and it got some traction. It was funny to read that a lot of people were surprised to see people still reading hard copies as well. I have never liked reading these big college football previews on an iPad, on a computer. It doesn't feel the same. I think the best way to do it's in hand. I think it's the best way to read anything still. So that's why I'm a hard copy guy over digital. Digital is a little cheaper, but the hard copy is just a little bit better. All right, so I've led into this all day, this game I've wanted to play. This is a Chris R. Ranks from Chris R Talks, and it's going to be on YouTube as well. Not this exact one. I'm going to change it for video, but this is for podcast, and I'm going to list the 5 shows you need to watch now that Game of Thrones is gone, before your HBO subscription ends or before you cancel it. So if you don't know what HBO is, it's a premium cable channel that you've had to pay for a long time. So HBO is free of a lot of rules that don't follow regular TV because they're subscription based. And that means their shows have become pretty based in urban legend. If you haven't had the opportunity to watch some of these shows, I'd recommend it very quickly. And if you are thinking about ending your HBO subscription, don't, because there's so much good content that comes out from that company. And no, this is not me trying to get a job there. I am going to start from the bottom. If you like funny shows and we're a big fan of Seinfeld, the 5th show is the show for you. Curb Your Enthusiasm. The Seinfeld co-creator Larry David plays a version of himself on the improvised series. He faces a constant barrage of life's little annoyances, which in David's sometimes well-meaning but terminally fumbling hands don't tend to say small, very, very long. So it's a very funny show with similar principles to Seinfeld, where the characters are people you should absolutely just hate and despise, but for some reason you love them. And the situations they get themselves into are so far-fetched and so funny that you just can't take your eyes off of them. It's a 30-minute runtime show. Each episode, you're going to get something you weren't expecting, and that's the beauty of Larry David. There's a lot of talented actors and actresses who have been in television for a long time that are featured on the show. And I think the funniest part about Larry David playing an alternate version of himself is part of the hilarity that is about Curb Your Enthusiasm. So check that show out. Information on it. Let's see. I think it's like 6 or 7 seasons. It's one of the funniest shows of all time. 9 seasons. 90 episodes. And there's a 60-minute special on it. Number 4. It's a new show. It's just come out. I'm excited to see where the show goes. I have only watched an episode or 2 of it. And the show is called Chernobyl. It's based on the 1984 disasters that took place in Chernobyl with the nuclear reactors and that whole city. The brave men and women act heroically to mitigate catastrophic damage when the Chernobyl nuclear power plant suffers a nuclear accident on April 26th. It talks about the miners, it talks about the government, it talks about the Soviets, and it talks about the implications that this disaster could have had on the world. It keeps getting better. If you want a more in-depth discussion on it, go listen to Pints at the Round Table. We talked about it on that show, and that's what sort of got me interested in it. The next show on the list, 6 Feet Under. This is a cult classic, even though it's one of the more underappreciated television shows of all time. This show is described as laced with irony and dark situational humor. The show approaches the subject of death through the eyes of the Fisher family, who owns and operates a funeral home in Los Angeles. Peter Krause stars as Nate, who reluctantly becomes a partner in the funeral home after his father's death. So this show is based around a new death every episode. It changed the way TV was seen because the story doesn't follow the same people every time. The story does follow the Fisher family, but the supporting characters change week in and week out, which leads to a lot more opportunities and interesting stories. And I have not watched it yet, but I'm excited to add to it. I've been compiling a list of shows I need to watch in my life, and this one is definitely high up on the list. That leads me into number 2. The Wire. The Wire is one of those shows you're definitely going to hear your parents talk about, more so your dad. This is probably my dad's favorite show of all time. If not, it's right up there. It's either this, The Shield, or NYPD Blue, all cop shows. But this series looks at the narcotics scene in Baltimore through the eyes of law enforcers, as well as drug dealers and drug users. Other facets of the city that are explored in the series are the government and bureaucracy, schools, and the news media. This show does a lot of things, but the one thing it did was show, and this is what a lot of people have said about it, is it shows the world of a place like Baltimore in such a realistic light. It really humanizes it, and it really shows the troubles that a lot of these people have to go through to survive the life they live in such violent neighborhoods. This show talks about gangs. It talks about the corruption of the police force. It talks about what happens, and the story itself continues to grow in mythos as time gets further away from it. And it's a show that I've never watched all the way through, but seeing episodes, it's extremely dark, it's extremely unpredictable, and it's one of those shows with characters that, once again, you probably shouldn't like them, but they see the world in such a chaotic view that you kind of understand it, and it really challenges the morality of the viewer. And I think if you want to watch a riveting crime show, The Wire should be right up there on your list. Before I go to the number one show you should watch on your HBO subscription before you cancel it, and these shows will probably keep you from canceling it for a long time, but before I give you the number one reason you should not cancel your HBO subscription, I'm going to give you some honorable mentions. The first honorable mention is Veep, a show I've never watched, but a show that people say is ridiculously funny. It follows another Seinfeld alum in Julia Louis-Dreyfus as the VP of the United States. She's extremely talented and funny, and I think it's a show that a lot of people would enjoy, even if you don't like politics. I'm excited to add this to the list of shows I'm going to watch. It's an Emmy Award-winning show. It's passed all the tests for a lot of people, and it's a show that a lot of people have enjoyed, so it's an honorable mention for sure. The next show is a new show. It was the show that actually followed Game of Thrones every week. Barry. Bill Hader, if you don't know him, he was a major SNL actor. A movie he was in was Trainwrecked with Amy Schumer, and he was one of the cops in my favorite comedy, Superbad. It follows a psychotic killer who wants to go to Hollywood and become an actor, but he can't escape his past. Very interesting story dynamic, but I hear it's a mix of dark, funny, and just a good all-around show. Next honorable mention, Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is a show that follows 4 or 5 tech inventors. They created an app that was a lot bigger than they even imagined it could be, and it follows their story on their growth as people and as a business through the trials and tribulations of Simi Valley that come with working with angel investors and working with close friends. And then, last but not least on the honorable mentions list, my personal favorite, Entourage. Entourage, yep. The one that follows 4 guys, one of them on their journey to stardom, finding themselves and starting a new life in Hollywood. It follows Vince, it follows E, it follows Turtle, and it follows everyone's personal favorite, Johnny Drama. And then the sporadic, angry, but super agent, Ari Gold, with this cast of people and the constant celebrity cameos that take place in it. It's an extremely fun show to watch. Is the acting the greatest? No. But do you start really just enjoying your time with the entourage and the feeling of making it in Hollywood with these guys? Absolutely. And I think it's just a good ride. It's an easy watch. It's not long. It's 6 or 7 seasons, 10-episode seasons, all 30 minutes apiece. You'll get through it in no time. I think it took me like 2 weeks. All in all, HBO does a lot of great things, and that leads me in to the final point on the show, and the last but not least, the number one reason you shouldn't cancel your HBO subscription. The Sopranos. This story follows Tony Soprano, who juggles the problems of his fractious family with those of a family of a different sort, the mob. He sees a therapist to deal with his professional and personal problems, which bring on panic attacks. He deals with personal and professional power struggles, affairs, and violence. The Sopranos has it all. The Sopranos is one of the greatest shows in television history, whether you like the ending of it or not. The Sopranos hits on the darkness of the mob and the regular problems that face families every single day. You grow attached to a lot of the characters, and you really just see that even the worst of the worst people are still human, which in the long run is it's crazy. But seeing this story and seeing what it has done, seeing some of these mob sequences, seeing some of the things that the mob do is crazy. And then to see Tony Soprano have to go home to his family and act normal is one of the greatest TV, mirror images that you've ever seen. And I think if you're going to keep HBO, or right before you cancel that subscription, you got to watch this show. And that's the fun game. It's a Chris R. Ranks, and that wraps up this episode of the Chris Renne Show. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Chris Renne MB. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Mom's Basement Productions. And then go follow us on Twitter at MBasementProd and Instagram at MBasementProd. Subscribe to this podcast to get the notifications for the show. My nose is absolutely painfully itchy right now, so I'm going to end this thing faster than usual. Adios, people. See you next week.